Maximize your yields while spreading out your workload with the earliest maturing winter cereal. Visit kws.com/CA to see how our hybrid rye varieties can work for you. High yields, high quality, high value for your farm. KWS, seeding the future since 1856.
All right, joining me now to talk about a rather large, scary, overwhelming undertaking, and that is cybersecurity, is Chris Law. He's partner with MMP and national lead for incident response with MMP. Chris, welcome here.
Thank you, Lindsay. Happy to be here.
So thank you for saying yes, because this is one of those topics where we sit back here at Real Agriculture and think, who can even speak to sort of the wide range of what is considered cybersecurity and how we protect ourselves. There's certainly, and we're going to talk about some of those bigger picture issues right now, but let's first start at maybe some of the more basic sort of everyday things that farmers, agribusinesses need to be aware of as far as cybersecurity and where they may be vulnerable.
Well, that's a great question to start. And I think, you know, first off, I want to say let's not overthink it. I mean, we all see those shows, those movies where there's all these sophisticated, hackers or threat actors that do all these, unfortunate things with large millions of dollars of ransomware. Yes, that still exists. That will always continue to exist. However, for the majority, what we're seeing, especially in Canada, in the prairies, right across the board, is the fact that there is ongoing basic fraud that's being performed through, computers and laptops and whatnot. And I think the easiest way to protect oneself is to, first off, make sure, you've heard of the many basic fundamentals, we'll call them table stakes, things or
Mm-hmm.
practices that everyone should be aware of. And that is, first off, multi-factor authentication or MFA. So everybody has a password. Everybody knows that they should have a hopefully hard to guess password that they can remember and they don't write down. But more importantly, you can have a simple password, but as long as you have another form of authentication with that account, whatever that is you use, that will make sure that you're much more secure than the person that perhaps just has a long password. So with that, it helps prevent, I would say, almost 50 to 60% of the potential incidents that would occur. And many times, some of these larger incidents you've heard of, uh, it's because they've never had fully implemented multi-factor. So for
Right.
those of you who don't know what multi-factor is, it's simply another method of authenticating yourself. That could be, as you see, through your cell phone or through another email or through a biometric measure. So I think that would be the first, shall we say, um, thing to do, or table stakes. The second would be to make sure that you understand your third parties. Quite often, what we see is your organization or your sort of space in this world is you've done some good things. You know what to do, and you've seen enough people telling you, okay, you have to do all these security and being mindful of what you're doing. However, you have to work with partners. You may have partners that handle your payroll or some cloud service provider that does certain things on your behalf. You let them into your organization, or you give your data to them so that they can, handle things on
Mm-hmm.
your behalf too, so that you can focus on your egg business. And that's great. What we're seeing is, unfortunately, the threat actors know that by rather than knocking on everyone's door, they can just knock on the service provider for the egg
Right.
business. And so with that, they get immediate access to their data, to your data, which you gave to
Right.
them. So it's always important to vet them to make sure that you're going with a secure, reputable service provider.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So,
And
and
then
that is one of the things that certainly as we see this is that there's several layers to this, right? And as you pointed out, there's our everyday as a person or a business, our banking, having that's right, that secondary authenticator, which maybe it's your phone, maybe it's an email, those sorts of things, but increasingly, and I think this is where there is a lot of concern, is that, as an individual or as a business, I may take those extra measures, but every time I add as you say, a piece of software or a third party or someone else who has access to either my banking data or even my, let's say, my field data, I
Mhm.
have to trust that that company is also protected. And we're certainly seeing right now, really it coming very close to home here in agriculture, where it seems to be, an outside or a software provider that they have been attacked and potentially held to ransom for their software, or for that access. This is where I get sort of scratching my head and trying to think, how do I, as an individual or as a farm, when I'm working with different companies, how do I know that, their platform is safe potentially?
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a very good question, Lindsay. And short answer is you don't know. I mean, we are not all cybersecurity experts. We're not expected to be. Hopefully, we all focus on ag and what our core business is. What we have to do is work with the providers, but also with experts, saying, okay, you know what, us, if we have a number of farms or agricultural facilities, we obviously likely use the same provider. And so with that, it's always good to obviously try to collaborate first with them to make sure that, hey, what kind of know what kind of information you're giving them, but at the same time, ask them for, are you safe? What measures are they taking to
Hmm.
protect the data and make sure that their services are available to us when and if we need it? And of course, you're going to get the usual marketing speak where it's like, yeah, we're perfect. We do all these wonderful
That's right.
things. And that may be true, not saying that they don't. However, as time shows, there's been many of these third party or service providers that have been breached. And usually what happens when that occurs is the fact that they unfortunately circle the wagons and then they get legal and you're kind of left
Hmm.
out in the cold. You won't get too much help. You won't get very
Right.
much notification and you may not have an alternative. So I think one of the first things we do with a lot of the ag clients that we have, as well as municipalities, is the fact that we reach out to each other, meaning we work on alternatives. We need to have backup plans, right?
Right.
If if this were to go down, if this service were to go down, do we have an alternative?
Hmm.
What can we do? And in addition to that, work together with each other in our communities to figure out um, this is going to be a common problem,
Yeah.
and I think it's always important to understand that and understand also, is there a way to make sure that we have, or at least can recover, albeit manually or in some other fashion? So
Hmm.
ensuring your own backups of your own system.
Right.
Um, it's always important not to trust another service provider 100%. We also must ensure that we have our own data that we need to do to if we have to move to another provider or
Hmm.
try to do manually steps in the interim. Okay.
Hmm. Right. So we saw, in the last little while, I believe it's CDK Global. I
Mhm.
think the estimate is something like 15,000 dealerships. So this is, yes, car dealerships, but it also impacted agriculture dealerships as well. They were in that. And then, of course, we're seeing the federated co-op issue starting to resolve itself. I think as of Friday, the card lock system across the prairies is now operational again. But you did
Mhm.
mention that about having either a backup or some other means or way to sort of reset to maybe a certain point. That seems to be potentially, with this FCL issue that, billing might be affected, being able to just continue processing, it may be impacted. So in thinking about how large scale some of these impacts can be, you did mention, having those backups, et cetera, but it feels to me like we are sitting ducks in a lot of ways. Like, are there ways that you really can completely, ransomware proof a business, or is it really about just mitigating that risk?
It's about mitigating that risk. Unfortunately, in any organization, as many people have heard and said over many years, it's only a matter of time before an organization is unfortunately compromised, and it can be no fault of that single organization or the third party. The
Mm-hmm.
idea is that if there's a determined threat actor or hacker, that they will be able to compromise that organization eventually. Now, that being said, let's accept that fact. But also, what's going to carry on and maintain a reputation in our business is how we deal with it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's the inevitability is the fact that every single organization will be hacked, or if not already, or in the process of being hacked. You've heard all that before, but really making sure we have the methodology and the approach and the process to deal with that. Now, as you can imagine with CDK and all the auto dealerships, they'd had to resort overnight, almost like COVID, to doing things manually so that they can
Mm-hmm.
compete with the car sales or whatever the leasing agreement is, finding out manual ways, albeit slower, probably not as efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But in the past, that's how we did in the first place. So
Right.
not forgetting that, but also more importantly, practicing worst case scenario. If that one provider or if this one service or this one system was down, can we determine, can we carry on business? And
Right.
let's practice that. Let's figure out what that is and let's practice it. And let's put that as an emergency, you know, whatever you call it, break the glass, pull out the handbook and do it
Yeah.
that way. Because I think that's what folks are quickly realizing now, especially with the CDK and FCL. Mhm.
Right. That we may have to perhaps remember how to do all these things by hand, things that we depended very heavily on software to do. So uh, that does bring up sort of one other piece to this is the aftermath of some of these things that happen. So we know that ransomware attacks can happen. The bad actor potentially they're looking for that payout, they move on, and they go on to their next one. They get their money that way. But we also see data breaches where that data is then sold. And individuals may eventually become targeted later. And so in those instances, we've certainly see companies that come forward and say, you know, we're offering to cover credit monitoring or some sort of identity theft monitoring service. Are
Mhm.
those worth it? Is that something that people should look into if they end up being part of one of these data breaches? Or are those really just, you know, extra precaution?
Yeah, I mean, there's there's many schools of thought with credit monitoring, and I mean that is the typical response from any organization that has had their data exfiltrated and unfortunately personal identifiable information, PII information being exposed. And that information is there, unfortunately, to stay. So
Mm-hmm.
once it's there, it's there. And so it is something that will help. It's a start, but I do not believe that it's the end all and be all. Obviously, with if your social insurance number is exposed and your personal information is out there, any number of millions of people can take advantage of that and cause ongoing issues.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, what I feel, in my opinion, is that there is not enough dedicated direct services to help folks that have had their identity breached, as well as then a number of bank accounts, credit cards, loans, all these things that can be immediately taken advantage of within hours of that information becoming public or exposed.
Mm-hmm.
And so all our government and all our sort of driver's license, all those systems and the processes for vetting and validating that this is the person that provides this information, are they mature enough to a point where we can hopefully prevent a lot of this fraudulent or identity theft situations? Unfortunately, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Anyone who's been through identity theft can probably vouch for the fact that it takes months, if not
Yeah.
years, and they're still dealing with the after effects of a severe identity theft. And it's unfortunate. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is the main sort of un driver, I guess, to make things hopefully find a solution. Credit monitoring is one thing, but there's so many things that can happen so quickly that it is simply, just one step to identify it. You already know that your credit may be at risk, and there could be credit cards and loans taken out immediately on in your name, and you having to,
Right.
shall we say, fight the system to prove that that wasn't us or that wasn't me. So I
Mm-hmm.
think a little bit more understanding and learning and education on the provider side that, is there a better way to validate, one's identity is something that we should work towards.
So when you get the second authentication, don't get irritated by it. Use it.
Hmm.
It's good. And when the bank wants extra pieces of ID, it's okay. Let's
Hmm.
remember that that's actually probably pretty important. But so that is very much yes from the individual. But to wrap this up here, I mean, as you mentioned, this is likely not the last we are going to hear of this. This is likely to continue, perhaps even at a greater scale. And so where does that, you mentioned, potentially more support for people who've had identity theft and working through that system. From an agricultural perspective, we're only seeing more Internet of Things. We're only seeing more interconnectivity of data and et cetera. What do
Hmm.
you hope to see as we move forward with some of these platforms? What do you hope to see in the security side that would make you feel a little better about the future?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think, trying to remain positive. I think, unfortunately, though, the ag side is there's a potential for even a larger, shall we say, attack surface or risk that we must, attend to or pay attention to. The water systems, the irrigation systems, the feed systems, all these are great systems. Why? Because they've always worked. However, as I've always, spoken to our ag clients, the fact of the matter is that these systems work, they're reliable, they've been around for many years, but they've been designed in fact to be that. But have they been designed to be cyber secure? No, they have not.
Right.
Have they been designed to make sure that only people who are supposed to access it and configure it and use it and operate it are restricted to those duties and functions and roles? No, they're pretty much, anyone can drive it forward and operate it. Anyone should be able to access it as quickly and easily as possible. That's great. However,
Mm-hmm.
in the hands of a bad actor or a threat actor or hacker, they could unfortunately cause a severe disruption to our food
Mm-hmm.
chain, which is a huge critical governmental and social issue. And, and given the economy, I think that they can be the next major target because it affects all of us, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
with that, I think due diligence must be paid, and prioritization of such critical um, food chain and all that, and the food source should be sort of top of mind for the government as well as
Mm-hmm.
additional folks like, of course, us in agriculture, because it can be so easy to do that. There are a number, what I've seen when I visited a number of these clients is that they have all the nice, convenient, shall we say, technologies to help, measure, calculate, determine yield, and all that stuff. That's great information. Now, is that information sensitive? Probably not. I mean,
Right.
it's great that, with this much rainfall, you get this much yield. That's great. And if you can tell that on your Bluetooth app, on your phone, great. My concern, though, is all the other apps that do the critical things, such as, cattle feed, controlling that, as well as controlling fuel and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those can cause irreparable damage. And with that, I don't think they are as secure as we hope that they are. So I think a good assessment of those can and should be done on a regular and continual basis.
Mm-hmm. All right. Chris Law with MMP. Thank you so much for making time for me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, most welcome. Thank you.